We received our travel documents from the Chinese authorities 2 days before we were due to leave for Lhasa, along with Neil and Judy Baird. We flew from Chengdu to Lhasa on Air China. For the first time in our China trip, the plane was delayed, and we took a seat by the window so we would get a good view, but in fact we were over the wing. We were met at the airport by Sunan, our guide, a Tibetan, and driven on the new road to Lhasa, which saves 50 minutes on the journey. The road was built by the Chinese. Lhasa, the capital, is at 12,000 feet and is surrounded by mountains. Our hotel, the Sheraton Four Points, was downtown and was quite adequate, and the room was reasonably comfortable. The air conditioning went at a very slow pace, and the food was not really up to standard. In fact, was very poor. The view from the hotel was fairly spectacular, and from our bedroom window we could see the Chinese army parading and exercising just across the street. Outside the hotel on our first morning, and we set off for the Drepung Monastery, driving through the town, and of course at 12,000 feet you become quite lightheaded and can be very headachy. No alcohol past our lips while we were in Lhasa, just in case. The monastery is up on the hill, and so we got a beautiful view of the valley. And at the entrance we are ready to start the climb up to the top, which was quite exhausting. We were in Lhasa over the weekend, so there were quite a few people visiting the monasteries, families with children, as they are all devout Buddhists. There are many prayer wheels around, and some are hand-driven and some are automatic. Automatic prayer wheel. The first monk we met, and the rock star of Lhasa practicing. The original Tibetan instrument. What tune is he playing? The higher we went up into the monastery, the steeper the steps. You will notice there are 3 sets of steps, and the middle one is for the Dalai Lama, who of course doesn't live in Tibet anymore. The final set of steps were really steep. Now at the top we enter some of the rooms, but in order to take a photograph we had to pay 20 won in each room. There were many Buddhas in Drepung Monastery, and Sunan is showing one to Neil. Drepung used to have 4,000 monks, but is now down to 300. And the amount of money that was scattered around was enormous, and I would think paid for a very comfortable life for the monks. A cheerful Tibetan boy, and that is the area where the monks now live, and we were not allowed over there. When some Tibetans die, their bodies are put into these receptacles you can see, and the birds pick their flesh. We are now on our way back down to earth, and on the way to downtown we pass a carpet factory, which is most boring. Downtown is the old town is lovely, and there is a huge police and military presence. There are 130 police posts in Lhasa, and you are not allowed to photograph either the soldiers or the police, or they get very upset. In the afternoon, we go to the Summer Palace. The Summer Palace is down in the valley, and here's a young lad with a quick escape hatch behind him, and dogs area, and you can see a dog leaving after having done its business. The entrance to the palace is through a garden, and there was nothing terribly exciting about it. The next day we go to the Potala Palace, which is the jewel in the crown and is where the Dalai Lamas lived. And it was built many, many years ago. We mix with the crowd doing their kora. The kora is when they walk around either the Potala Palace or another monastery and pray. It may take them 2 to 3 hours, and they do it 2 to 3 times a day.
No, I know. What was the Red Palace there?
Right here.
No, I know.
Yes.
What was it there? Well, this is a movie. I want to hear you say what it is.
Red Palace. At the time, King Sonsegambo, he started. In Red Palace, you can see the meditation cave for the King Sonsegambo at the time of the 7th century. White Palace is at the time of His Holiness the 5th Dalai Lama. And Red Palace represents for religious part. White one is the politics part.
You just heard Sunan, our guide, explaining the difference between the red and the white palace. And here we are at the bottom of the hill, about to start up on another long climb. It was something like 300 steps to the first gate. But we all looked pretty cheerful about it, and somebody took our photograph. Not once, but twice. And here we are at the main entrance into the palace, and we start climbing further until we get to a main square, and more steps, and finally we get to the top, where the view is spectacular, and we go through the Dalai Lama's apartments, but of course we are not allowed to photograph. On the way down, we see some gardeners doing a good job. And at the bottom, some people are still doing their kora. Lunch was at the new Mandela restaurant, and we were on the rooftop garden. Now, mandala is a tapestry which is made by 4 lamas. They start in the middle, and they crush rocks, and use the crushed rock with different colors, and work to the outside. There were plenty of prayer flags on the buildings surrounding us, and the art of knitting has reached Tibet. In the afternoon, we go to the Sera Monastery, which is also in Lhasa. Some men were repairing mattresses using goat's hair. Every afternoon, the monks gathered to debate, or rather it was the teachers asking the novices questions about Buddhist manuscripts. And if the novice got the question right, the teacher would clap his shoulder once. If he got it wrong, he would clap several times. And some of the novices were having a really hard time. Some of the novices obviously had not done their homework, like the 2 you're about to see, who were not getting the questions right and would have to do the washing up for a week.
It's not one, so it's not one.
One at a time.
There are about 400 monks at Sera Monastery, which is in fact smaller than Drepung. In the afternoon, GM and I went for a walk, and we crossed a bridge, and there was a river. Our final day, and we walked through the old town. There is a picture of our guide, to the Jokan temple. Most Tibetans are unemployed, as the Chinese take all the jobs, and if they're not tour guides, they're shopkeepers. But it was interesting to mix with the local people at close quarters and to see some of the shops. I asked this lady if I could take a photograph, and she said yes, and offered her money, and she refused to take it. We are now outside the Jokan temple, and there are a number of pilgrims there who have come to pray. You will notice that there are very few foreigners in my picture, because there are very few foreigners there. As you can see, there were quite a few people going into the temple, and again, we were not allowed to photograph. A statue of the princess was the main attraction, but with the crowds, we couldn't even get close. In the afternoon, it was time to go to the airport, and we went back on the same road. And as you can see, they're planting a lot of trees here to try to keep the dust down. That's a Chinese project. And there are some of the locals working the fields. And 2 yaks. There weren't many of them around. Nearing the airport, we could see some of the mountains to the west. Unfortunately, not as far as Everest. At the airport, we tried to get lunch, which was pretty horrible, I have to say. And then China Airlines arrived once again 2 hours late. As we flew from Lhasa Airport, we gradually climbed up into the mountains, which to start with didn't look too bad, a little snow, and then it got a little more snowy. And finally we wondered what would happen if something happened to the plane and we had to land. Where would we do it? On the whole trip over the mountains, I only saw evidence of one area where there might have been some human activity, 3 red tents. And we were in the air for quite a long time, on our way to Xi'an. Landing at Xi'an, our next stop to see the terracotta warriors.